Good morning, everyone. My name is Morgan.Champion. I'm the Director of Postsecondary Reciprocal Distance Education, and I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the FL-SARA webinar. Some of you have previously registered for our in-person workshop and know of our change to the webinar format due to the impact of Hurricane Irma. Our hearts go out to those still dealing with schools being closed, power being out, and other issues related to the storm. We certainly appreciate your flexibility in moving this presentation to a webinar so more individuals can attend. While I am sorry that I cannot meet each of you in person, I am thankful for the opportunity to still provide you with the information you need to submit your FL-SARA application. If you have colleagues that are unable to attend this morning, this presentation is being recorded and will be posted on the FL-SARA website as well as the FLVC website. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Florida Virtual Campus for their continued support throughout the planning of this workshop and their assistance in moving this event to a webinar. I would also like to thank the other sectors involved in the planning of the information to be discussed today. Nancy McKee and Iris Elijah from the Board of Governors, Teresa Antworth from the Independent Colleges and Universities of Florida, and Corinda Barrett from the Florida College System. We have had many meetings preparing for the workshop, and I appreciate their support throughout the implementation process. Also on the line today supporting this webinar are a few experts in their respective fields: Marshall Hill, Executive Director of NC-SARA, Jim Richmond, our legal counsel at the Florida Department of Education, and Jeannie Yaki-Fine with the Cooley Law Firm. My goal for today is to cover the information you will need to submit your FL-SARA application and provide an overview of FL-SARA and where we are in the implementation process. We will be taking questions throughout the presentation if they're applicable, and we'll also have time at the end. If you have institution-specific questions or highly technical questions, please contact me directly. I will have my contact information posted on the last slide. Let's go ahead and begin with the legislative overview. The legislation that dealt with the Reciprocity Agreement was signed into law on June 9th. It created Section 1000.35 of the Florida Statutes, which established the Postsecondary Reciprocal Distance Education Coordinating Council. There are 5 individuals that hold seats in the council. It's the Commissioner of Education, the Chancellor of the Florida College System, the Chancellor of the State University System, the President of the Independent Colleges and Universities of Florida, and the Executive Director for the Commission of Independent Education. These are the individuals that currently hold the seats for the Council. Ms. Pam Stewart is our Commissioner of Education and also our Council Chair. Dr. Ed Moore is the President of ICUS and is also our Council Vice Chair. Mr. Marshall Kreiser is the Chancellor of the State University System. Ms. Madeline Pumariega is the Chancellor of the Florida College System. And Mr. Sam Ferguson is the Executive Director for the Commission. Just some more highlights related to the legislative overview. The legislation authorized Florida to join the Reciprocity Agreement. It required Florida to choose the Reciprocity Agreement and apply within 60 days of the legislation being signed. It designated the CIE, the Commission, for the administrative support to the Council, and it identified the Council as the state Florida entity to actually administer the Reciprocity Agreement. To continue, the Council's main function is to review and approve the applications that are submitted by institutions and to ensure institutional compliance with several issues: accreditation quality, consumer information and protection, ensuring that institutions have proper disclosure and reporting requirements, to ensure that institutions have a proper complaint mechanism for students to follow, and then also to ensure that institutions are financially responsible. And the last piece of the legislation that we're going to touch on is that we had to draft rule language that was recommended to our State Board of Education and then also approved. Some of you are very familiar with SARA, and some of you may not be that familiar. So we're just going to go over the institutional eligibility requirements to be sure that everybody understands what's required of your institution to be eligible to participate in FL-SARA. You must be a degree-granting institution. You must be physically located in the United States. You must hold proper authorization to issue degrees. You also must hold accreditation as from a U.S. DOE recognized accrediting agency. And then for private institutions, you must have a financial responsibility score of a 1.5 or above. Now, if you do have a score between 1.0 and 1.49, you would be eligible to apply. However, you must submit justification along with your financial statements, and the council would deem whether or not you would be able to participate in FL-SARA. So now we're going to go over just a couple of the challenges that Florida schools are currently facing regarding out-of-state distance education. And you all are the experts in your field. You know the issues that you're dealing with, but many schools are dealing with costly licensing fees, having different requirements in each state related to your marketing, advertising, and recruiting. Depending on where your faculty is located could be a problem in specific states. And then the definition of physical presence is also defined differently in each state. I believe it's Arizona. I apologize, it's actually Arkansas, where the authorization timeline can take up to 2 years to be in compliance. So the timeline varying by state is a problem. And then again, the time-consuming individual state applications are very difficult to keep up with. So right now what we're seeing as our solution is the State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement. It creates reciprocity between 48 states for distance education, and it covers 2 areas. It covers your distance ed programs, but it also covers the mandatory supervised field experiences. So this will, Sarah found it difficult to determine whether these students were on-ground students or distance education students related to the mandatory field experiences, so they extended their coverage to include the on-ground students. So just an example of how this is beneficial to students, just say like a University of Michigan student was doing their teaching internship in Michigan and found out they needed to move back to their home state of Nebraska. And because Nebraska is a SARA state, they can complete their internship and still receive credit back at the University of Michigan because of this reciprocity. So again, it's a big benefit to students and something that you would be able to offer to your students. We just had a question pop up about non-credit programs. If you're referring to non-degree programs, if you are a SARA institution, your non-degree programs would also be covered under SARA. So if that answers your question. One more benefit I just wanted to include about SARA was just that the non-degree programs are also covered under SARA. So that's a big benefit. Next thing we're going to do is just go over a brief overview of the National Council for State Authorization Reciprocity Agreements. As I've already stated, there are 48 states that are member states, as well as the Virgin Islands, and it's completely voluntary for states and institutions. I went ahead and put their website up there, nc-sara.org. They are going to be revamping their website, but this has a lot of resources for you. If you go to their document section, you'll find a lot of documents I think will be beneficial for you to review. Now, NC-SARA has been in the works since 2013, but in January of 2014, states were invited to join. Just some highlights about NC-SARA. SARA states agree to impose no additional non-SARA requirements on institutions from other states. This is, as you all know, since we have all the sectors represented here, this is open to degree-granting post-secondary institutions from all sectors. So we have our public colleges and universities, our independent institutions, and our both nonprofit and for-profit schools. And just one more thing is that institutions participating in SARA agree to follow the interregional guidelines for the evaluation of distance education programs. And these are actually included as an appendix in the application to ensure that you are familiar with these and you are agreeing to abide by these guidelines. In a previous presentation, I was actually asked about the governance structure, so I just created a very simplistic graphic to kind of show how this all works. So NC-SARA is the National Council, and they work with the 4 regional compacts to administer the Reciprocity Agreement. Member states join through their regional compacts, so Florida is a member of the Southern Regional Education Board. And so we join through SREB, and then obviously you're here today to learn about how you can be a participating institution and join through FL-SARA. And just one comment as well, NC-SARA designates a state portal entity contact from each state, and they serve on a steering committee to accept and renew SARA states. So I am actually the state portal entity contact for Florida. And another big benefit of having one person in each state is that each person handles all of the SARA-related questions and issues, so it keeps information consistent across the country. So I would just ask, if you do have SARA questions, that you would please direct them to me so I can ensure I get you the right answers. Now we're going to go into a little bit about Florida SARA. So this is our timeline for implementation. As we've already discussed, Friday, June 9th, Governor Scott signed our legislation. We held our first council meeting on June 30th, where we voted on our council chair and vice chair, and we also approved our operating procedures for the council. We also reviewed the Florida SARA application, and the council voted to join NC SARA. Then on August 3rd, we had another council meeting in conjunction with a rule development workshop where the council reviewed the draft rule language and approved that. And then on Friday, August 4th, we had our SRAB Steering Committee conference call where we were granted contingent approval. Now, this approval was granted contingent upon our rules being finalized at the State Board of Education. And just to continue with our timeline here, Wednesday, September 13th, we had a State Board of Education meeting. It was actually moved to a conference call due to the storm. And we did present our rules for approval. It was taken as a consent item. There were no questions, and we were granted approval there as well. Now, the first date that our rules can be filed with the Department of State is tomorrow, the 27th. And I've already spoken with my contact at the department. Everything is on track for those to be filed, and I've signed all the paperwork necessary for that. So everything is in the works for our rules to take effect on October 17th. So if our rules take effect on that date, that would be the first date that we can actually accept applications. Now, there's a tight window here. As you can see, October 27th is when the applications would be due, and that's because I need about 5 to 6 weeks to do a good thorough review of your application, and then I also have to have my meeting materials to my council members a week ahead of time. So as you can see, December 12th is our next council meeting, where we will actually be reviewing institutional applications and approving them to participate in Florida SARA. So just to recap about our rules, it's Rule 6N-1.001 through 6N-1.007 of the Florida Administrative Code. If you did try to find these on the Florida Administrative Code or the Florida Administrative Register, they would not be available yet as they have not been filed. So we have our proposed rule language available on our website, which is floridasara.org, and I'm going to go into that a little bit more into detail, everything that you can find on our website. But as you know, the rules implement the statute. So these are some of the things that you will be able to find on our website. Now, currently, the floridasara.org domain name is not working for today. So by the end of the day, it should be up and running. So if you would like to use a workaround just to access this information today, you would go to fldoe.org/SARA, S-A-R-A. It's fldoe-.org/SARA. And we can put that, if you have a question about that or would like the link again, feel free to shoot me an email. So on our website, once we do have an approved institution list, we will list those institutions on our home page. So this is a great way for students to find you and know that you're a participating at SARA institution. We will actually have a link to your website to make it very easy for them to reach you. We will have the applications available for your download, which you also have available today. You can download both the Florida SARA application and the institutional application checklist, and we're going to go through those in just a bit. There's also going to be fee information there and how to pay your fees and how to fill out your fee transmittal form. There will also be the complaint process, just what constitutes an acceptable complaint to be presented to Florida SARA, and just the process for that, as well as the email inbox that the students would need to send an email to submit a complaint. You'll also find presentations and documents available there. This webinar will be up as soon as we make it ADA compliant and get it edited. We will have that up there and ready to go. And then we also will have our rules, as I've said, and we will also have the CRAC guidelines, and then a link to both the SARA manual and the Unified Agreement. And when the 2018 Spring Data Reporting Guide is published, I will also have that uploaded and available for your download as well. So this is just another simplistic graphic I created to kind of let you know the application process. So your applications will be submitted directly to me via email if preferred. If you do submit your application package in snail mail, I highly suggest that you put it to my attention if you're mailing it to the department. We receive probably hundreds of pieces of mail a day at CIE, so I just would hate for it to get lost in the shuffle. So please make sure that you include my name that it's addressed to me. So once I receive your application, I'll do my review and I will communicate any deficiencies to you. And then as I stated before, my agenda materials have to be to my council member 7 days prior to the meeting. So if there are issues with your application or I'm having a hard time reaching you, your application may just be moved to the next meeting. And then of course your school would appear on the agenda and the council would vote to approve or deny your Florida SARA participation. And now we are going to go through the new institutional NC SARA application. And these resources are linked under the chat box and on the top tab called PDF. So if you can just, if you go to that tab, it's PDF up at the top, you'll be able to see the resources that are available for download. And the first one that we're going to review right now is our NC SARA application. Now this may seem elementary to go through each thing one by one, but I want to ensure that there are no questions about what the institution is agreeing to. So if you will just let me know if you have any questions about these items as we go through them. So of course at the top you make sure you have your institutional name correct, and you would click the Southern Regional Education Board because that's the regional compact that Florida belongs to. If you'll notice here, it states that the Chief Executive Officer or the Chief Academic Officer of the institution must be the one completing this application and initialing here on the left-hand side. So please make sure that you have the appropriate person filling out this application and initialing, because if it's incorrect, I will have to return your application and have you submit a new one. Let's go ahead and go through, we'll start with number 1 here. So this is your authorization to operate in the state. So this is one of the items that does require documentation. And I tried to make it easy for you all. I did create an institutional checklist that we're going to go through, but it links directly to whatever documentation you need to attach based on your type of school. So I'm going to show you that in just a moment. As we've stated, you have to be a degree-granting accredited institution. So you would attach your accreditation certificate for number 2. And again, that's on the institutional checklist that I'll go through. Then for private schools, we've already talked about your financial responsibility score. You would need to submit your audited financial statements, and that is in our rule that that's required. And if you have, between the 1.0 and 1.49, you would have to submit substantial justification to the council so they can review and make an informed decision based on the information you've submitted. So those are the 3 items that, are the true documentation for your application. If you go down to number 4, we've already talked about the CRAC guidelines. This is just stating that you will agree to abide by those. And again, they are an appendix of this application, so you are welcome to review those. You agree to be responsible for the actions of third-party providers. So this is somebody like Pearson or 2U, anybody that you have a contract with for your institution, you are responsible for maintaining that contract. And yes, if you are, I just had a question pop up, if you are a state institution, a public institution, you would not need to answer number 3. It actually says right there that to please leave this blank if you're a public institution. So thanks for bringing that up. Let's see, I think we're on number 6 here. You agree to notify your state portal entity of any negative changes to your accreditation status. I keep up with the accrediting agencies and I pay attention to their actions, so it would be very helpful if you could go ahead and let me know, if anything negative does happen, that you could just forward me that information. It would be very helpful. You're also agreeing on number 7 to provide the data necessary for your SARA activities. And we are going to go into this a little bit more in detail, but we are also going to have an institutional webinar that's going to address these data elements that you're going to have to submit. So bear with me there for just a moment. But again, back to number 7, you are agreeing that you will submit your distance education enrollments by state and that you will adhere to the NC data sharing agreement. Number 8, agree to work with your home state portal entities to resolve any complaints arising from students in SARA state. So if I get a complaint to our Florida SARA info box, I would forward that to you first and allow the institution to go through their normal process with the student, and then we would just work together to ensure that complaint is handled. Now, I will be asking on the institutional checklist for a copy of your complaint procedures, because as part of this agreement, you will need to list the council as the appellate body for SARA complaints. So it's just letting the student know that if they're not satisfied with the outcome of the complaint, they are able to appeal to the council. Number 9 is what we've already talked about with the state portal entity, with your chief academic officer or chief executive officer being the one that actually initials this application. Number 10 is a big one, and we're going to go into a little bit more detail about this later. This is saying that you will agree to notify your students in writing if your program meets the professional licensure requirements in their state. Okay? Now, it's SARA's expectation that you will do your due diligence to find out if your program meets the requirements in the state where the student resides. If you have, spent a lot of time doing this, you're still not able to figure out if your program meets the requirements in their state, you are supposed to let the student know in writing that you are unsure that your program meets the requirements for professional licensure, and also provide them with the contact information for the board, the licensing board, or whoever they would need to get in touch with to check on that. Now, an email will suffice for this communication. However, any means necessary to try to get in touch with the student would be favorable. So just again, number 10 is an important one. Number 11, the institution is agreeing in cases where you cannot fully deliver the instruction for the education that the student is contracted for, that you provide a reasonable alternative for delivering the instruction or financial compensation for the education they did not receive. Number 12, you agree to pay the fees to Florida SARA. And number 13, you're agreeing to pay the fees to NC SARA, and we will go over both of those fee structures in a moment. And then number 14, you would agree to abide by the conditions of provisional approval if necessary. And those are outlined in our rule if you're interested in reviewing those. And then we're just going to keep going down here to page 3. This is really important information that it's correct, so please ensure that when you fill this information out, it's correct. And I have heard from other states that this is the biggest issue, is having a principal contact and a secondary contact, because I guess with some turnover things, sometimes you lose contact with the SARA contact at the school. So I just want to make sure I have at least 2 people that I can contact. And you both of these contacts will also receive the automated emails and updates and communication from NC SARA, because you will be listed as a primary school contact. And then, as we've discussed, the appendix here are the CRAC guidelines, so feel free to go through and read those on your own. And I think the next thing that we're going to go over is the institutional checklist. So if you go back up to that PDF tab, you will see the institutional checklist. You go ahead and click on that. This is just something I created. You don't have to submit this with your application. This is just something I tried to do to be helpful to you all, to kind of keep you organized and let you know exactly what you need to submit. It does designate by public, private, and then by CIE and ICUF. It just designates what items you would actually need to submit. So all of you would be new applications, so you would fill out the new application. You would provide your state approval, which again, these are direct links to what you would need to submit. And then CIE schools, you would submit your current license with the commission. That would be your authorization to operate in the state. We've talked about your accreditation, your certificate, including any notices or reporting outcomes with your accreditor, your financial index score. These are, again, these 2, 4 and 5 are for private schools only. This number 6, as I mentioned, I'm going to be asking for a copy of your complaint procedures, just showing that the council is listed as an appellate body for Florida SARA students. And I also included an example of complaint language just so you can copy and paste that if that's helpful for you, but feel free to word it as long as it lists the council as the appellate body. And I had a question pop up about the contact for SARA. It does not have to be your CEO or chief academic officer. They do not have to be a primary or secondary contact. They just need to be the one that's actually filling out the application. Thank you for that question. And then back to the institutional checklist, number 7 is just your Florida SARA fees. So you would actually attach a copy of your check with your application so we know that the fees are coming. And then you would also include your fee transmittal form. So these are all links, the ones highlighted in blue here. Those are all links to helpful documents. So I'm hoping that's going to help you all stay organized with your application. And just to recap, you would need your new institutional application. This was created by NC SARA, but if you do notice on the application that's available for download, it says Form 1000, because this is actually a form that's incorporated into Rule, so it's very important that you submit the one that's incorporated into Florida Rule. It's all the same information, it just has on the footer, it clarifies that it's a Florida form. So this application is required in our Rule, and it's a uniform application that's required of all institutions. And as we discussed, for CIE schools, you would need your current license with the commission, and this must be an up-to-date license. You would not be able to extend from meeting to meeting and still be able to get approval for Florida SARA. We would need you to have an up-to-date license. And then for state university system, ICUP, and Florida college system, on that institutional checklist, you would be able to access exactly the documents that you need to submit with your application. And again, back to the accreditation, we know that you have to be an accredited school, so we would want your accreditation certificate and then any supporting documentation should you have that. For the financial composite score, again, this is for private schools only, and we require your financial statements in our rules, so we would need audited financial statements. You would need a 1.5 or above to be eligible to participate, but with the 1.0 to 1.49 with justification, the council can determine whether or not it's acceptable for you to participate. If you have under a 1.0 composite score, you would not qualify to participate in Florida SARA. If you do not receive Title IV funding and you don't have a financial responsibility score, you would need your CPA to calculate a score for you, and we would need to see their calculation sheet and how they determine that score as part of your documentation. And as I said, I am requesting a copy of your complaint procedures for your institution, just so I can ensure that you're abiding by the SARA agreement, that the council is listed as an appellate body for student complaints. And then, as I stated before, complaints that are not resolved at the institutional level will go before the council for final determination. Let's go over the SARA fees. There are fees due to Florida SARA, so you would submit those with your application. Okay, if we don't have fees with your application, we would not be able to review it. So please submit your fees in a timely manner with your application. I'm not going to go through each bracket here for the fees, so we have that information available on our website. And then once you're approved by the Florida SARA Council, I would go into the NC SARA system and mark you as approved, and then your institutional contact would receive a link to pay fees. Now, you must pay these fees to NC SARA within 60 days, or you would actually have to submit a new application. So please ensure that you submit your fees on time. And this I just kind of created for you all to just have a recap of the whole process. So once you're approved by the council, you would receive an approval letter from me, and then your Florida SARA contact will also receive an approval letter from NC SARA with a link to pay your fees. Once your fees are paid to NC SARA, you'll receive the logo that you can place on your website, and at that point you may begin enrolling students. And then looking into the future, when your renewal is 90 days away, you will receive an automated email from FL-SARA with some information for your renewal, and I will also make contact with you at that point. And just to go into, I wanted to make sure I hit on these two items one more time, the data submission. So FL-SARA, part of the agreement is that you will disaggregate the data that you report to IPEDS based on where your students are located. So this may require you to develop a process to track where your students are located. And I know this is an issue for some institutions, and we want to make sure that you're prepared and you have the resources that you need. So we will be holding 2 additional webinars that I will announce the times and dates for shortly. But at that point, you will hear more about what some other institutions have done to do their data correctly, and I think that will be very helpful for you. The Spring 2018 data guide is provided by FL-SARA, so that will either be emailed to you, or it will be available for you to download at some point. And again, as I said, there's going to be a discussion panel with some institutional representatives who've already implemented this process. So the required student disclosures, this is just something, again, I wanted to hit on. It's very important that you inform your students in writing if your programs meet the licensing requirements in their state. And then if you can't confirm whether or not your program meets the requirements in their state, you at least let them know that you can't confirm, and then provide them with contact information for somebody else that they can get in contact with in their state. Let's go on to the next slide, which is this is announcing our national panel discussion. And some of you that have registered for the webinar or for the FL-SARA workshop, you know that we had some discussion panels kind of already set up for this. So we have some national speakers, Marshall Hill, the Executive Director of FL-SARA, Jeannie Aki-Fine with the Cooley Law Firm, and then Cheryl Dowd, who's the Director of State Authorization Network. They will be speaking on Tuesday, October 3rd at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, so I suggest you attend that webinar, and we will have a description posted for that as well, and we'll send that information out to you shortly so you can register for that. I see a question pop up about institution paying $4,500 and $6,000, a total of $10,500. That is correct if you have over 10,000 students, because yes, you would pay your fees to FL-SARA, the $4,500, and then the $6,000 to FL-SARA. Let's go on to our next slide, which is our implementing SARA at your institution. This is our discussion panel with institutional representatives, and these individuals, I want to say thank you to them and to our national speakers. They had already made their travel plans for the workshop, and were ready to come down and share some insightful information with you, and unfortunately we had to move this to a webinar, but we still want to make sure that you get that information from them. So Charlene Ross-Lee, Bob Igo, and George Wright will all be available on Friday, October 13th at 10 a.m. Eastern. And it'll be the same setup as this, so you'll be able to type your questions in the chat box. So I will be there to help moderate those questions for them and make sure that you can ask them those really institutional specific questions. But they will be giving an overview of how they implemented SARA at their institution, and just some tips for the data collection and things like that. So I think it'll be very helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and post my contact information on this last slide here for you. So you're free to contact me anytime. That's my direct line. Email is, most of the time it's best to reach me via email, and then we can set up a phone conference to speak. But I'm going to go ahead and check out some of these questions that were posted. And I just want to say, if your question is not answered currently during the webinar, I will reach out to you separately and ensure that we get you the answer that you need. We have a question about when the first annual data submission will be due. I have spoken to Marshall Hill about this, and typically the window is between mid-May and mid-June. So as soon as that information is readily available, I will certainly provide it to you all, but it will be due between mid-May and mid-June is when we anticipate that window to be. But we will certainly communicate with the data guide and the sharing agreement. All that information will be available. Let's see. I think there's a question about payment. You do have the option of paying via check or paying via credit card to FL-SARA. For FL-SARA, your fees must be paid via check. The FTE calculation for fees to all students, not just distance education students, correct? Yes, that is correct. The FTE for the fees, that is based on your full-time equivalent enrollment. That is all your students, undergrad and graduate students. And there's another question, do you have to renew every year with FL-SARA and NC-SARA, same fees? That is correct. These are the current fees that are set. I believe NC-SARA sets their fees every 2 years, to just commit to those fees for every 2 years. So at least for this year and next year, these will be the fees. And I see a question there about following the deadline dates. Can we enroll students for the spring semester? Assuming everything goes along as planned and you have all of your application materials submitted correctly to me, I shouldn't have a problem reviewing them in the timely manner and getting them on that first meeting. Once you're approved by the December 12th meeting, I will do everything I can to, I will certainly go on probably that same day and approve you in NC-SARA system. So as long as you pay your fees to them on time, you would be able to go ahead and start enrolling students for spring. I'm just checking out these questions here. If you have more than one student in Florida, do you fill out an application? If you have more than one school in Florida, do you fill out an application for each campus? That's a great question. That would depend on what your accreditation covers and if you have the same OPEID number for each campus. So what I have done in these situations, so I've gotten that question a lot, I typically ask for a phone conference with the school to ensure that we have all the information, because just because you're designated, like for the commission of schools, just because you're designated as a branch campus with us does not necessarily mean that you're a branch campus with your accreditor. So I would ask that you please contact me directly and we'll work through that together. Is there contact information for the, oh, I just missed that one. Oh, we just took care of that question, so we're good. And that's a great question. Are the renewal fees the same as the joining fees? Yes, they are. You would pay those fees once a year when you renew. I have a question about when the next council meeting after December 2017 is, and we will address that at our December council meeting. We would make a plan for the next meeting. And that will obviously depend on the amount of applications that we have, but I certainly understand the urgency to get you all started recruiting students outside the state. So we will look at probably having one possibly February. So it just kind of depends on what our council wants to do. I'm trying to decipher this question. Does the payment we make in October cover our entire year? Will fees be due again the following October? Yes, that is correct. So your fees that you pay for your initial enrollment, they'll be due they will cover your full year, and then upon your renewal, you would submit your fees for the next year. I think I already addressed 29. I'd contact them directly on that one. Number 44, if the FTE that determines SARA fees based on the most recent data published to IPEDS, yes, that is correct. It's based on your enrollment that you report to IPEDS. The fees are based on the enrollment that you have reported to IPEDS. Some of these are a little technical and in the weeds and probably better handled by the national panel. So I do have a record of all these questions. So again, if you don't get an answer today, I will certainly contact you after the fact, and your question has been received, though, so I just want to assure you of that. And are we disaggregating all IPEDS data or only distance education enrollment? That would only be your distance education enrollment. That's a good question. And And I have a question about the timeline for implementation. October 27th is the due date, and then December 12th is the first council meeting. So the first round of applications will be due on October 27th, it's a Friday, and then December 12th is the first meeting where our council will be reviewing and approving applications. I have a question about when you talk about the professional licensure, do you mean national or state licensure? That is the different states and the different licensing boards like Board of Nursing, things like that. If we have existing state-by-state approval, are we still allowed to enroll those students until we receive SARA approval? Yes, you would be able to do that. And we actually have, I believe it's Arkansas is the state. They are working with Florida schools because they understand that Florida is in the process of joining SARA. So I would reach out, if you would like me to, I'd be happy to reach out to the state portal entity contact in that state and ensure that they're kind of granting like a grace period for Florida students because they understand the timeline and that we're really doing our best to get our students in as soon as possible. I believe I already addressed this, but I'll make sure. Florida SARA covering non-degree seeking students. So again, Florida SARA would cover your non-degree programs. Okay, let's see. Are there two applications, or does the one you presented cover NC SARA? The one that you have available for download is the only application you would need to submit with your Florida SARA application package. There's a different application for your renewal, but for right now you just need to be concerned with the one that has the Florida form number at the bottom. And it will be available on our website, and again, our website should be up by the end of the day. We had a request to post the timeline slide again, so we will shift back to that one real quick. Oh, that's right. The presentation is available for download, so if you'd like to go back to that timeline slide, feel free to shift back to that on your own. Let's see. I have a question about when the next application date and window will open. I should have that information as soon as, since this is my first time reviewing applications, I have been told by other states that, again, it takes about 5 to 6 weeks. So after I do this first round of reviews, I will know the workload and how quickly I can get schools on meetings. So again, at the December 12th meeting, I will have a firm date for you for the next application deadline and meeting date. Okay, we still have some questions up here, but again, I think that there are issues that are going to be best addressed offline. But we will be developing an FAQ to post on both FLBC's website and our Florida SARA website. And I just want to thank you for your time today. I appreciate you, again, being flexible and moving this to a webinar format and submitting some really great questions for us to address here. And again, my contact information is up on that slide. Feel free to shoot me an email. And I also have a Florida SARA contact list. So I send out updates, meeting information, things like that to this group. So if you would like to be added to that list, please shoot me an email and list all of the individuals from your institution that you would like to receive the Florida SARA updates. And again, please make sure you revisit those 2 other webinar dates and times to make sure you can clear your calendar and be there. Those will also be recorded. So if you're not able to come during that time and date, we will certainly have that information posted as well. But again, I think it'll be a really good experience to listen to the national speakers and the institutional speakers that have already implemented SARA at their institution. So again, just want to thank you for your time today and have a wonderful Tuesday.